Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to our school board meeting tonight. Our meeting this evening is a public work session of the board where we will be hearing a variety of reports and have discussion regarding topics which may come to the board at a future date for official action. During the meeting tonight, the board will not be voting or making a final decision on any topic. Questions and comments by members of the audience are limited to those topics on the board's agenda for this evening. Our meeting is being videotaped tonight for community cable channels. Individuals attending tonight and intending to speak to the board should be aware that you are being videotaped. In order to comply with the requirements of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, we record the names and addresses of all citizens who make comments to the board. To assure compliance with this, we ask that when you have comments, you come up to the microphone located in the middle and give us your name and address before you make your comments or ask your questions. We also ask that you limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in order to give all those who are here this evening the opportunity to speak to the board. With that, we'll move on to our agenda, and our first topic is the elementary attendance boundaries. Board member Mrs. Shields was the board liaison on that committee, so I'll turn this over to her to introduce.
Okay. Thank you, Pat. As you know, the task force on the realignment of elementary school boundaries came before the board last month with our preliminary recommendations on the new boundaries for elementary schools. Since that time, we have had 3 public meetings, the last one being last evening. I hope you all have in front of you your map, which has been our Bible since early September, and I will point out this is the revised edition. All of this came about because we are trying to accomplish 3 things, as we've said all along. We are trying to define the boundaries for our 2 new elementary schools, Walton Farm and Bridle Path, as well as allow for some growth that we see coming in, and provide enough classrooms for the in excess of 900 6th graders who are being moved back into the elementary schools. We do have our task force members sitting in the front, and I know the board will thank them later, but I personally would like to thank them for all their time and effort and aggravation. This has been a monumental thing. On last proposal, as you know, we had in excess of 1,500 students that we were moving. We have worked all along to try and reduce that number because we realize this is an emotional aspect as well as it is not a numbers game. Each one of these numbers is attached to a North Penn student or a prospective North Penn student. With that, I'd like you to open up your maps, and I will have Mr. Keffer go through the revisions.
Thank you, Mrs. Shields. Before I begin the explanation, I'd just like to pick up on a comment that Mrs. Shields made when she said that in the original proposal, it was indicated that 1,530 youngsters would be moved, and of that number, 107 would be moved the second time. In this proposal, we have been able to reduce the total number of students who would be moved to 1,427, and the number that would be moved the second time to 92. After the initial proposal and the 2 public meetings that we held, the committee met and considered much of what the public had to say. The committee is well aware that it is an impossible task to think or believe that we would ultimately arrive at a proposal that would satisfy everyone. The second thing that the committee worked on was some refinement of its thinking relative to the size of the student population at the Montgomery and the Hatfield schools. And as I go through this revised proposal this evening, I think that will become increasingly clear. Before I begin to get into the details of the proposal, I think it's necessary once more to explain the various colors and designations on the map. To begin with, the 13 attendance areas are defined with the heavy black lines. The original proposal is designated in the areas that are bounded in red and also the red numbers, and those are areas 1 through 19. The blue indicates areas that were considered and involved and were changed in the proposal that we are presenting to the board this evening. and those areas are numbered from 20 through 30. The first thing I would like to point out that if one just takes a brief glance at the number of blue areas on the map, you will see that this committee was truly responsive to the needs of the public and also the need to further reduce the student enrollment at the Hatfield and the Montgomery schools. If you would turn your attention first to the Montgomery attendance area, and if you would also open your packet of material to page 2. What we tried to do was make this as clear and easy to follow as possible. So on the top of page 2, where you see the Montgomery school listed, in the far left column, you will note that the K-6 population is listed at 662 youngsters, because that was where we were in the original proposal. If you look on the map, you will see that we have determined that there is a need to further reduce the population at Montgomery. We know from the Economy League studies that 1 in every 4 new houses in the district will be built in Montgomery Township. We also know that Montgomery Township is served by the Montgomery, the Bridle Path, and the Gwynn-Nora elementary schools. So there is a need to be concerned about the total numbers of students that we put in those schools, since we know that future growth, a lot of it will be concentrated in those areas. The Montgomery School is built to handle more than 700 youngsters. I think it's interesting to note that in 1991, we moved more than 200 youngsters from that particular school because of a growing enrollment, and I can tell the public today that we are now again at 820 youngsters in that building. It is far beyond what it was planned to do. We believe that there will be considerable future growth, and as the committee worked with this revision, it determined that we needed to further reduce the population, and we turned to Area 20, which is bounded by Doylestown Pike 202 County Line in that section. There are 99 youngsters in that area, and it's our proposal to add them to the Bridle Path School, remove them from the Montgomery School. So to follow the chart, you see that it subtracts that number from the 662, leaves us with 563 youngsters at the Montgomery School. We believe that in time, that student body will grow and totally utilize that building. We had the choice of either doing it now or doing it in a year or two, and I think it was the committee's judgment that we ought to do it now. You can see on the far right column the number of classrooms that would be required to deal with not only the K-6 population, but the Learning Skills Program, which requires 2 rooms in that building because of the number of youngsters who need that particular program. The gifted will go into a room. The transitional first grade would go into another. There would be room for art and music. It would bring the utilization of that 30 classroom building to 30 rooms. In each of the school populations that I deal with after this point, you will see on the far right a column that designates how the rooms would be used. Having made that shift and put that additional number of youngsters into the Bridle Path School, it obviously meant to the committee that we would have to do something about the original proposal for Bridle Path, because that would seriously increase the number of students there. And the way to do that quickly became evident, that we would also have to consider some change in the NAP attendance area. And if you look at the NAP area and you look at the area in blue designated 22, there are 82 youngsters in that area. If you make the assumption that the kindergarten next year will be the same as it is this year, that adds another 11, and that's a consistent practice in gathering this data, it means that there are 22 youngsters that we had originally decided to move out of NAP that we have now determined ought to stay there. So at the bottom of page 2, under the NAP school, you see that we are adding in the 93 youngsters from that particular area. It's also the case if you look at Area 23, the area that had been in the first proposal transferred from Oak Park, all of Area 7, and now we've subdivided that, was going from Oak Park to Knapp. At one of our public listening sessions, a lady indicated that if we were to do that, we would be encouraging the children in Section 23 to form friendships and cross the railroad on non-school days, weekends, summers, evenings, and that sort of thing. The committee agreed with that and agreed that those children should remain where they are. And if you go back to look at the Knapp proposal, we have subtracted those 27 youngsters there. It would not be a problem during the school day because from that area the children would be bused. But we did think that we were setting up a potential hazard for those children going across the railroad at other times. So what that does to the Knapp population by subtracting Area 23, which is 27 youngsters, and adding the 93 from Area 22, it brings the Knapp population to 475, and you can see the room utilization. We think that's a reasonable number for that building. There will be very little future growth in the Knapp area. There will be some, but it can be accommodated at that total number. If you would then kindly turn to page 3 in your packet. I have already indicated that for the Bridle Path School, we started with 659 at the point we left it in the preliminary proposal. I've indicated that we would subtract Area 22, which we've now placed in the Knapp attendance area where it had originally been. You subtract that 93 youngsters, you add in the 99 youngsters from Area 20. So really, it's just a matter of shifting those two areas. And that leaves us then with 665 youngsters at the Bridle Path School. It would indicate the need for the rooms as listed on the right. We think that's quite comfortable. There will be some additional houses in the Bridle Path area, but not a significant number that would cause us to want to alter that down the road. If you would then turn to the blue area designated as 21, that change from the preliminary proposal resulted from a parent who stood up and indicated that she felt that the use of the railroad as a boundary would be far superior to the use of East Walnut and Norman and Lenhart roads. There are a very limited number of youngsters. There are only 3 youngsters in that area, and the committee agreed with that recommendation. As you can see at the bottom of page 3, it has a negligible impact on the proposal for the Culp School. If you would then turn to page 4 in the material, we're back to Bridle Path briefly because that area 21 had been originally designated to go to the Bridle Path School, and just to keep it clean and neat and tidy, we felt it necessary to go back and show that those youngsters would be subtracted from that school as well. If you then turn to the bottom of page 4, we need to deal with the Oak Park School. Our original proposal left that with 485 youngsters. I did explain the Area 23 that we agreed should remain at Oak Park, so that adds those 27 youngsters. It brings the Oak Park student body to a projected 512, and it again shows the way the rooms in that particular building would be utilized. If you then move to page 5, the committee had and the administration had the same concerns about the Hatfield population that we had about Montgomery. Hatfield is a 30-classroom school. We were concerned that our first proposal, leaving 673 youngsters in that building, perhaps was heavy, and it needed some further reduction. We also know that there are some areas in that particular attendance area that are still experiencing growth. And what we determined to do is to transfer Area 28, designated in blue, from the Hatfield to the Walton Farm School. There are 25 youngsters in that particular area, so it brings down the total number somewhat. We also took a look at Area 29, which is between Elroy, Durstein, the Cowpath, and Township Line Road. And we discovered that at the present time, that is largely vacant land. There are 6 elementary students in the area, but we do know that the ground is being turned over and houses are beginning to go in. So we felt that by transferring that area to Walton Farm, what it does, it prevents some of the future growth that could occur in the Hatfield attendance area and protects us from an overload of enrollment in the Hatfield school. That would bring Hatfield to 642, which we believe is a comfortable number in that building and allows us to take care of some future growth there as well. At the bottom of page 5, then, we need to turn our attention to the Walton Farm School. In the original proposal, we had left Walton Farm with some 621 youngsters. We were quite interested in reducing the number of students who would experience a move either the first time or the second time to the degree that we possibly could. Area 14 contains 9 students, and of that 9, 4 were involved in the transfer from Inglewood to Nash in 1991. And we are proposing that that area be continued in the Nash attendance area where it is at the present time. In Area 15, there are a total of 6 students, and we are proposing now to allow those students to remain at the Nash School as well. It is a matter of 15 students. It does not make a significant difference in either the total population or the distribution. I realize I direct you to look at Walton Farm, and I'm talking about what we're going to do at Nash, but that's all right because it's on the top of the next page. So we gained 1. Okay, if you look at page 6 at the bottom, we start now with Walton Farm with the 606 youngsters that I just explained previously, and we indicated that we would like to change our proposal relative to Area 27. Originally, that area currently goes to Inglewood. Our original idea was to have it go to Walton Farm. The committee believes that we need to do something about Walton Farm because we put more students from the Hatfield area into it. So the committee's belief is that we should allow those 33 youngsters to remain in the Inglewood population. So that's why you see them subtracted. I did explain the addition of areas 28 and 29 to Walton Farm, and essentially that again is a trade. We end up at Walton Farm with approximately what we started out. We think that's a good distribution. We know that there will be future growth at Walton Farm, and we believe, given the resources that the district has at this point, that 615 is a reasonable number to have at that school at this point in time. I would then ask you to turn to page 7, and we need to discuss the changes at the Gwinnett Square. The original proposal had proposed the movement of Area 13, designated in red, to the Inglewood School. Again, in the interest of reducing the number of students moved the second time, there are 74 youngsters in that area, of which 26 were moved from Nash in 1991. So when you add in the assumption for kindergarten, we are proposing that that number now of 83 remain in the Gwinnett Square school. We are also proposing that Area 26, bounded in blue, which is essentially the Gwinnedale development and the Willowick Apartments, containing a total of 39 youngsters, also be permitted to remain in the Gwinnett Square School. And what that does, it also reduces the number of youngsters that we've moved twice by 5. We then also realized that if we added in both Area 13 and Area 26, we would, if we left it at that, we would have more youngsters at the Gwinnett Square School than the Gwinnett Square School could handle, and we would have absolutely no place to go with a limited amount of development that still is projected to occur in that particular attendance area. So therefore, we have determined that areas 24 and 25 should be removed from the Gwinnett Square School and added to the Inglewood attendance area, which I will explain in a moment. There are 133 students there. In area 24, you also notice that it is a shaded area, and the shaded designation means that that is an area that would be transferred the second time. The committee is fully aware that 21 youngsters in that area would be moved the second time. But since our interest was in reducing the overall number of youngsters moved the second time, it seemed preferable to move 21 rather than to move 26. It means 5 fewer youngsters. The committee recognizes it's 5, but it is 5. We also looked at Area 30, and let me find Area 30. Okay. Area 30 is also going to be removed from the Gwinnett Square attendance area, and that area will, as I will point out in a minute, go to the Gwynn North School. That leaves us with 622 youngsters at the Gwinnett Square School. We know that there are approximately 64, 65 additional houses that are planned, and we think that the children from that number of new houses can be accommodated with that number. You can see the distribution of students. We think that's workable, and we think the room utilization will work. At the bottom of page 7, it simply then is a matter of starting with Inglewood at 422 students. We would add areas 24 and 25, as I have explained. We would subtract area 13, as mentioned earlier. We would add area 26. We would subtract area 26, and we would also subtract area 27, and that would get us then to the 466 youngsters that are listed. If we would then turn to page 8, we have the Gwynn North School at 496 students from our original proposal. We did that because, as I mentioned early on in this presentation, the Gwynn North School serves a significant part of Montgomery Township. We know that there will be some additional growth in the area that it serves, and we did not want to get the Gwynn North School to 600 or 600 plus, as we have done with some of the others. But it seemed reasonable to remove Area 30, place it in the Gwynn North School, adding 37 youngsters, which would leave the Gwynn North School with a total student enrollment of 533. If you then turn to page 9 in your materials, the chart here summarizes all of the committee's work for all 13 schools on a single sheet. You can see the schools across the top. You can see the K-6 grade designations down the left column. You also see special ed, and for those who have not heard any of the prior presentations, I would simply point out that the district operates a number of self-contained special ed classrooms They serve special needs children from the entire district, but the population for each category is such that we can only have a limited number of classes and really only need a limited number of classes to serve them. And they are placed in the schools that you see designated. Underneath that column, you find a labeling LS part-time. That's Learning Skills Part-Time Program, referred to in previous years as Learning Disability Program. You can see that we have provided space for that program, but it is not a full-size classroom in all cases. These this program is a matter of children go there for part of their day, and they go there generally in limited numbers. Under the Bridle Path School, you see what may appear to be a strange designation because it indicates 1/2. You also see that at Gwinnett Square, and you also see that at Walton Farm. And that is because in the construction of those facilities, where you have special ed youngsters, and you have them in numbers that generally are not going to exceed 15, perhaps 18 tops, it did not seem a good use of facilities to build full 900 square foot classrooms for that limited a number of youngsters. So in those three buildings, what the board and the administration did was architecturally plan classrooms that have movable walls that come right down the middle, so that when needed as a full-size classroom, they can be used in that way. But when they're housing special programs of this kind for a limited number of youngsters, we really get 2 for 1. You can serve 2 programs in a single classroom. In other cases, with the LS program and the gifted program, and art and music for that matter, you see that the figure 0 inserted, and that simply means that in the case of art and music, there are no classrooms available to serve as art and music rooms. It means that in those schools, the children receive those programs, and they receive good, sound, solid programs. It's simply that the teacher in art and music moves from classroom to classroom with a cart containing her materials and supplies. In other cases, you see a 0 and then the abbreviation SEM, and that means that particular program is housed in a seminar space. That, again, is a space that is somewhat lesser in size than a full-size classroom. For many of those programs, that is quite adequate. I want to point out that in prior presentations, some members of the community were critical that some of the gifted programs operate in less than full-size classrooms. But I need to point out that there's a very good reason for that. In many cases, there are only 10 or 12 or at most 15 youngsters in those spaces. So the same rationale that I gave for a smaller space for a more limited number of special ed youngsters also applies here. The principals have been very efficient at the scheduling of those groups, and we have found over time that that works, and it's a good use of our space. And I think with those remarks, Mrs. Shields, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Keffer. As you can see, we were sympathetic to a lot of people's needs. There are 11 changes from our first proposed realignment boundaries. We did have another meeting last night, as I said, and there was much discussion afterwards. You will notice all along, as you look at your map, just with the proximity of Gwinnett Square, Englewood, and Walton Farms, there's a large concentration of children that are being moved there. And when we first began this process, I described it kind of as a balloon. You push in one spot and it pops out another. And there's been a lot of discussion that maybe there are trade-offs. But in every trade-off, the end result was the same. We were decreasing the number of children we were moving a second time. Our other meetings, we did not debate this. It was basically for your input, and as I said, we tried to listen and act upon many of them. I would like to commend the public for the thought out and well-planned presentations. It really helped us a lot. It was amazing, some of the things. And as I said, you've seen 2 maps. There were many maps even before this. Some of the suggestions given us we had looked at even as far as early September. But then again, as I said, we're dealing with numbers, and every one of these numbers is attached to a student. Tonight, basically, we are here to present this to the board. As I've told my fellow members on the task force, it is our recommendation, but ultimately it is the 9 board members who will accept or reject our proposal. I have a unique thing in that I'm wearing 2 hats, both as a board member and as a task force member. As I said, last night after our meeting, we met for a while and had several things we discussed. And one of the things I wanted to point out to the board is the area, if you look at Area 10, okay, we have presently reduced the number of children in Gwynedd Square to 622, all right, by taking Area 24 and 25 out. Now, we did hear from those people last night, and what I'd like to say is, yes, if we help one part, they are affected. However, we're talking numbers again. We're talking 56 verse 22, and it is a move for them. It might not be the move they had expected to Gwynedd Square, but they will be moving anyway just because they don't fit in Gwen Nor. What I'd like to direct the board's attention to is Area 10, okay? As you see, we've made Area 26 on the bottom where we've been receptive to the Gwynneddale and Willowick townhouse development and keeping them at Gwynedd Square. Now, there is an area, Valley Forge Road, the Scobie Jarvis area, where there are 22 children, okay? And there's another 2 in Breezewood. All right. There has been many suggestions that perhaps we could go down Valley Forge Road, okay, Allentown, cut around Breezewood, and use the top part of the creek. All right. And that would add another 22 children to Gwynedd Square. That can be accomplished since we have reduced the number of children there. However, in doing that, we are also decreasing the utilization in Englewood. I just wanted to point it out because it's something that there's been a lot of discussion with as a task force, and I think the numbers say we can accommodate them, but I'd like your input on that area as well as anything else that you might have questions on. At this point, I'd like really to turn the meeting over to the board to see if you have any questions of Mr. Keffer, myself, or task force members, particularly as far as the new revisions.
I'll start it off.
Okay,
I would like to really thank the task force. This is probably one of the most thankless jobs that anybody in the community could have. I thought that the 5 points that you guys went after, your first proposal, addressed those and addressed those clearly. I think that when you went back out and got community input, when you look at areas such as, I'm looking at some of the revisions, 23 and 21, when you in doing those kind of changes, you were very sensitive to neighborhoods. You were very sensitive to the needs of the parents out there, and they made a lot of sense. And I think that an awful lot of these changes make sense. When you look at, I think 30 and 27 and 22, those were large blocks of kids. As you start moving around, you're very sensitive, and those kids are staying at the schools that they're at today. And you're avoiding moves on the kids, which are really good. I think in total, when you look at the reduction in the number of kids that are moved and the reduction in the number of kids that are moved twice, I think that you did an excellent job. You did everything that anybody could ask you for, and I would like to express my extreme appreciation for probably the most thankless job in the world. You did an excellent one. In connection, however, with Gwynedd Square, I would like to ask Mr. Keffer, what would happen, the item that was discussed after last night's meeting, if the area around Scobie, Jarvis, Breezewood were to stay at Gwinnett Square, how would that affect the numbers on Gwinnett Square?
It would, since there are 22 youngsters in that area, there are actually 20, and the assumption would be that the kindergarten stays the same, so you have 22, Ralph. It would take the Gwinnett Square population from 622 to 644. Mrs. Shields mentioned there were 2 additional youngsters on Breezewood, and if the board is considering that, then I would suggest that we use the creek as she indicated, and that would bring it to 646. That's quite doable. It would not it would not change the use of the rooms at all. It would fit from a class size perspective, and it still allows for some future growth.
Okay. And as I understand it, I think I had gotten a copy of the proposal that was submitted to you last night, that the high development area would still stay in, if that proposal was included, that development with the new kids that aren't there now would be going to Inglewood.
Yes, it would. What you have, as Mrs. Shields pointed out, if you look at the map, the Tomenson Creek starts over near, well, it doesn't start there, but it goes under the Sumneytown Pike, and it goes diagonally along the northern border of 26. The black and blue line obscures the southeast branch of the Tomenson Creek. So that would be one side of the triangle. The northeast branch of the Tomenson Creek, which is clear on the map, could become the northern boundary to this. We would throw Breezewood Lane in there. And then the bottom of the triangle would be Allentown Road. So that triangle at this point is virtually empty. But that's where the development will go. And that would go to the Inglewood population. So though you haven't asked the question, what happens to Inglewood, I need to demonstrate that for you as well. We start out with 466 youngsters at the Inglewood School. Obviously, we have to subtract those 22, which we would do, and that would bring it to 444. Again, it does not change the room utilization. It lowers class size a tad, but when you distribute 22 youngsters over 7 levels, it's not significant.
Thank you. Being from that, not in this area, but being in that general area, I guess the concerns that I had about that particular area were twofold. One, as you moved Area 13 away, it more or less isolated those folks. And I was, Charlie, as you're aware, I was involved in the move from West Point to Gwen Norr,
Yes.
10 or 12 years ago, and 300 kids moved together, and all of their friends moved. If we don't keep Scobie and Jarvis there, it's going to be those kids, and only those kids moving. And the other one is that every one of those kids are in the double move category, because they all went there, they all moved to Gwinnett Square 2 years ago. Personally, I would support, as long as it does not impact, it does not appear to impact the short or long-term viability of either Gwen Norr or Inglewood, and all of these kids involved are double moves in essence. And because of the nature of the beast, when you move 13 and left it at Gwinnett Square, I would suggest that we modify the proposal to include that provision which Mrs. Shields outlined.
Ralph, I just provide the board with one additional piece of information, that the total number of youngsters involved in that would be 24, but it would now mean that we're just slightly over 1,400 in total moves, but it also has the effect that it reduces the 92 by 8 more,
Exactly.
which I think, is a desirable thing.
I think it pulls both of those numbers down even yet further.
I'd also like to thank the committee for all their work, having been on one redistricting and probably being on the next one. For the secondary schools, I know it's very difficult. My concern, Charlie, is a guarantee that the classrooms at Englewood would not be diminished. You've got certain, if the classes are being taken off by 24, are they falling within all 6 grades, equally distributed? Because some of them are close enough that, for instance, in the first grade, there's 60, that's 3 classes, that's 20 apiece. If that goes lower, would you then just do 2 classes instead of 3 classes?
Well, if the board wished to jot that down, if you found Inglewood in your packet, I can just quickly run from K through 6 and say that the numbers of youngsters involved would be 2 in second grade, 6 in third, 1 in fourth, 4 in fifth, and 5 in sixth. So what that does, as I indicated earlier, Carmen, it simply makes class size a bit lighter. For example, in the first grade, there would be 3 sections, 58 youngsters total. We're going to have a couple of sections of 19 youngsters in them.
Right. My concern was that if one grade was much lower, then you'd end up with 30
No.
on each one. So
No.
I'd like to at least keep that if we're going to be having that at a 19. I think that's a benefit for the children to begin with, and certainly it utilizes the rooms. And since you also have an art and a music in there, I think that's a great
I
utilization.
calculated, class sizes for this whole proposal, and I found that it's interesting to note that the present average right now, today, is approximately 22 youngsters in the primary grades, when our limit is 25, and in the intermediate grades, where our limit is 28, it's approximately 24. It's interesting to note that this proposal works out, it maintains those same averages. Now, the board appreciates the fact that, sometimes the public gets concerned about equity, and I think we have to talk about equity in terms of class sizes, always a range. There is no way that it is possible for us to assure the same number of youngsters in every class. That would be a wonderful dream, but probably also an impossible one.
I think the board needs to keep in mind that these numbers are estimations and
Yes.
represent numbers from, I believe, either 3rd or 10th day enrollment. Over the course of the year, if we hold true to form, we'll have a few hundred more elementary children in our schools between now and June, and by next September, upwards of, we've typically averaged about 300 additional students. I also, Charlie, I think in that area 10, below Tom-Menson Creek, isn't there some sort of a development of townhouses
Yes,
going
there
in
is. There's a townhouse development plan, so I think that the reduced number of youngsters, which results in a lesser class size, I think is a fairly temporary thing. I think that one could say, well, that's going light. I heard Mrs. Leahy say that's a benefit to the children. I would agree with that, but I think that by keeping those numbers light, when you know that there's future growth, it's going to tell us that ultimately we're going to be more central to that range than we are at this point. Clearly, we're on the lower end at this point.
My concern was basically that we wouldn't have a classroom of 30 and then end up with a teacher's aide. If the room is there, I think we should divide it equally
No,
and
we,
have
we,
it there.
we have consistently in this proposal used the class size guidelines, 25,
Yeah.
28, and I point out to the board and the public that where I think Alan was going. This is a planning document. This is a projection. It is typical for us in normal years about Christmas time, early January, to begin to do this kind of study so that we can get a handle on what our numbers are going to be, what our staffing is going to be as it relates to budget. But as I think the board is aware, that changes monthly until we get right down through the summer. If we need more sections, we will create them. If we don't need them, we will decrease them.
Thank you, Charlie.
Charlie, a couple of questions. In Area 10, right where the 10 is, that's the townhouse development that's starting to be built now, Stonegate, right?
Yes.
And that would continue to go to Inglewood even if we move the Scobie-Jarvis neighborhood?
Well, that's the
Okay,
proposal,
okay.
Pat.
And how large is that townhouse
That's
development?
Pat's proposal.
Understood.
200,
About two.
Several hundred, okay. So any concern about Inglewood being low in numbers, I think will probably be rectified
Yeah,
fairly quickly.
quickly.
Yeah. I would support leaving the Scobie and Jarvis people in Breezewood, since they have been moved already, letting them remain at Gwinnett Square. It seems that it will have a negligible effect on either school at this point. Other question, yeah, did you want?
I just wanted to say, you can see where the task force had some discussion here, because that is the only area in that particular thing where there will be growth. It's pretty well established up further. So that's why I wanted to bring it to the board's
Right.
attention and
Right.
see how we were kind of in a catch-22 here. Thank you.
Other question, Charlie. As you look through the schools that have 30 classrooms available, we have a low of Montgomery at 563 forecast, 615, 622, 640, and then we have 662 at Bridle Path, which I would think you're saying Montgomery is projected to be the fastest growing area. Won't that also affect Bridle Path? And do you have any
Well,
concern about those high numbers?
No, I don't, and I don't think the task force does either, Pat, because if you think about the Bridle Path area, there are only a limited number of places where it can grow. One of those is a development that is currently going in near the township building. That's a limited number. The golf course project is still, there's still some to go there. But beyond that, it's pretty much built up. When we talk about the growth in Montgomery Township, I think what we're really focusing on is the lower end of the township. Clearly, and interestingly, from 202 to Upper State Road, if one were to total that up, there are virtually 600 youngsters. That's about saturated. The area between Upper State and Stump, where the Montgomery School is located, there's still a limited amount of space in there, but that is rapidly filling up. The vacant space in the Montgomery area, interestingly enough, is between, let me get the map out, Keenest Road and Lower State, and the board is aware that that's also where the Hull Farm is located, which you now own. So what we did by buying that is preventing other people from building houses.
So you're confident then the 563 at Montgomery will allow for enough growth that we won't need to push
Yeah,
up into
and-
Bridle Path attendance area?
I would believe that's the case, and that's why we considered making that additional change with Area 20. I think we also have to make a comment about the Gwynn North School, because there is still room for growth in that attendance area. Mr. Cutler, a well-known builder, owns a significant piece of the land below Hartman Road, and ultimately that will be developed at some point in time. And that obviously is in the Gwynn North attendance area, so we have kept that in mind as we work through the number at the Gwynn North School. There are some other areas in that particular attendance area, and one of the big unknowns is what's commonly referred to as the Witchwood Farms property, which is in that triangle between 202 and 309, directly across from the mall. The supervisors have that under discussion. It's my understanding the owner wishes to develop that as a commercial property. It's my belief and my understanding that the supervisors in Montgomery Township are not in accord with that at the moment, but that in a sense is a wild card. We don't really know what's going to happen. But again, I think to some degree, we could handle that as well. I really believe that this plan will go a long way to prevent the need for this board, this administration, and yours truly having to go through this again.
Charlie, as we talked earlier today, I believe that there's in excess of 100 kids expansion available at both Gwynn North and Montgomery. Is that true?
Yes, that is true, Ralph. If you look at your packet on page 9, and just take, let's take the Bridle Path School as a good example. If you take the 107 youngsters that are listed, you realize that requires 3 rooms. A kindergarten room can handle 50 youngsters, so conceivably, we could have 150 kindergartens. We could have 43 more than we do, and it wouldn't change a thing relative to the room space. If you look at first grade, 5 rooms can handle 125 youngsters, so we could put 18 more in. In second grade, 15 more. In third grade, 7 more. When you go to fourth grade, since there are 28 youngsters per section max, that's 112, so there is space for 18 more. And in 5th grade, with 3 sections at 28 per section, there's room for 10 more. And in grade 6, the same thing is true. You can put 7 more. So that's a total of 118 youngsters that if they all fell right, you could put in the Bridle Path School. Now you have to keep in mind that as you look at that distribution, it's fairly even. It's distorted at the kindergarten level because obviously we're not going to get 43 additional kindergarten youngsters. So if you say, well, let's make that a more typical distribution and you say it's 20, it still means that we can handle 100 youngsters. I do not believe that we will see 100 additional youngsters in that attendance area. And we worked that through for all of the schools in a similar fashion. And using that methodology, one arrives at the conclusion that the schools range now from about 80 to about 89% capacity. Now that's a rough and dirty way to estimate the capacity, but I think I've explained to the board several times that capacity is kind of a floating number. It depends on how one deploys the rooms in a given year.
Charlie, that was my concern, that the real key is how many students are in a particular grade that will continue to move through, and what's the additional growth capacity in that school for that particular grade. If you look at Gwynedd Square, for example, if you take the new addition, and that's what I was concerned with, if we add the additional students to Gwynedd Square, and I think you said there were 5 from Inglewood that would move over, that would essentially still leave 7 spots in the 6th grade for new children that year, and then of course they move on and they're out of there.
Right.
And Inglewood, similarly, I think the 3rd grade looks like the maximum where there's 6 more kids still available to be, 6 more spaces for children to be placed. So, you know, that's what was my concern is there expansion in the existing grade structure right now? Because once you go over the limit, now we have to make a decision of, do we add another classroom or not? That now impacts the building space,
Absolutely.
which allows, which
Absolutely.
then becomes a cost factor. Do we have to add a modular, or do we have to take
Well,
away a...
if we look at our past practice, I've explained several times in public session, and I think to the board in the initial presentation, that this board has tried to run a prudent course between providing the space that's necessary to deliver a quality education to the children in our area and cost. And one of the decisions I think that has been made by the board along the way is that we would not necessarily build all of the additional rooms that would be required to provide an art and a music room in every school. I know that many of you believe that would be a very desirable and a very nice thing to have, but I also know that we have operated programs quite successfully from carts, and I would argue that they are comparable to other districts that provide that kind of space. So when we reach the numbers, Dick, that I've just talked about, we reach the capacity per classroom, then we have some options. And historically, one of those options has been to use rooms for art and music as an additional capacity figure. So if you go back to the Bridle Path School, and if we had the need for 2 additional primary sections, we could put an additional 50 youngsters. That is how Mrs. Curley, the principal at the Montgomery School, is managing 820 youngsters, because Carol has used virtually everything, including the faculty room, which is classroom size, and has worked out an arrangement, a temporary, a jerry-rig deal where they eat in smaller planning centers. There are 2 of them that serve that purpose. It's not desirable, and I'm certainly not recommending it, and I want to give you the idea it's a good idea, but it's something that we've had to do to deal with that situation. The other thing we can do and have done, if we wind up with a class that has 26 youngsters or 29 youngsters, we're certainly not going to create, in many cases, it's not a matter of creating an additional section. Today, we have access to many certificated teachers who cannot find jobs, and we have employed some of those people, trained to be teachers as aides, and we have solved that problem. Many teachers have found that a very beneficial thing, because essentially you have 2 adults helping to support youngsters in the classroom. We've done that in a number of the schools where we simply didn't have room space to create new sections. So we are dealing with the lack of room space in that way. We also have economics in mind to some degree when we're doing that. The board is well aware that we have also in some cases added some modular classrooms. I think the most recent illustration of that is when I presented a proposal to you that indicated that we simply could not house the programs and the students at the Culp School, and the board, I think, was very gracious in allowing us to add 4 modular classrooms. And I need to point out that that's something that we don't anticipate is going to happen, but it could happen. At some point in the process, in one building or other, I may be back and say, we've exhausted our options, we need to do this.
Well, that's my concern. As we talked about, and as you carefully articulated, we could use an art and a music room should we need it.
Yep.
That prompted me to look at the art and music rooms, and you can see under Knapp and York Avenue that we don't have either or both where we could use that. Subsequently, looking up at Knapp's 5th grade, I see that there's 28 students approximately in the 5th grade. Is that, now that's right at the guidelines. In fact, if my math is correct, it's actually 1 over in one of the classes. Is that correct?
It's one short grade.
Or 1 short? Math's not correct, I guess. You know, what happens in that case, that looks like our right now the breaking point or one of the crucial links to this whole plan. You know, if we know that, you know, it's one year away from moving out of the school, that's not a problem. We can add an 8 or something like that. I'm just concerned that we would have to add a modular for a year or something like that.
I think, first of all, I would say that there are a number of cases where that situation applies. If you look at the Oak Park School, you see in the primary grades we're 1 away from the maximum number. The choice that we had there is to go with this as a planning document and deal with it if a problem emerges, or allow the potentially hazardous situation with the kids going across the railroad. The committee opted to risk this, and if we need to deal with it either through aids or if we need to come back at some point you know, with a proposal to do some modulars, that's a possibility. I would point out that this is simply a planning document. This is where our studies take us at this point. And there may be additional youngsters on the one hand, but there's just a greater likelihood that there may be fewer youngsters at one grade level or another. It balances out over time. If it does become a problem, I would assure you that we would be as creative as possible in solving the problem, and if we realize that we can't do it with the resources, then I would come back to you and say, I think we need to consider some modulars or something beyond what we have. I believe, and I want to say this very publicly, I believe that over the next couple of years there will be a need for some additional classrooms someplace. I'm kind of putting you on notice that I think that's a reality.
That's there, Charlie.
No, I just think that's a reality. I think we operate a very large system. I think we have been incredibly lucky, and I think we have demonstrated for you that the administration, the principals, have made full use of the space that we have. And when I think that we've exhausted those possibilities, then I think it's time to come to you.
What is your total population you get of all the schools?
It's just short of 7,000, Bill.
And what was the PEL max projection for? I forget what it was. I looked at those numbers and I thought I remember.
It's going to take me a little time to find it.
You know, while you're looking for that, Charlie, I'd like to, there's some of the parents that their kids are going to have to move a second time. And as the parent of a son who moved and was in his 5th school by the time he made 6th grade, you'll find that the kids adapt to it very easily, and in probably a week they'll be in great shape. It's the parents that take a lot longer to adapt to a new school. So please bear with them. They'll do fine, and hopefully you'll do the same.
The answer to your question of what is the PEL's projection for 94, K6, it's 7226. And if you keep in mind what Alan has pointed out, that historically we've grown a couple hundred I think we're within shooting distance by September.
Now that's, did you say that's the PEL for this next year?
For
What's
September
the-
of '94.
What's the max P, I think it was in 98 we peak.
Right now, I'm sorry, the question again?
When do we peak for K to 6? 80 and 98 or 97, 99, it's around.
Looks to me like it's in 98, which would be 6643.
And that's K to 5.
I'm sorry, 7794.
So that's a roughly
If that all
another-
happens, I'll be back.
Another 800 children, but
True.
but it's 800 kids over 13 schools now instead of over
Yes.
11 schools. So,
Yes.
you know, that makes a big difference. And there's space for the kids. We just need to make sure that they pick the right spots to live in.
Well, see,
They have to come to us before they
that's
go.
one of our,
Go in the right grades.
Yeah, that's right.
that's one of our problems,
you're a
and the other
second grader,
problem
you have to
is
move over
the distribution, which we have no control over. I mean, they don't come out of neighborhoods packaged in 10 of each grade level. If they did, this would be easy.
But I think, Charlie, that your provisions in Hatfield and Montgomery and Gwynn Nor are appropriate to what is reasonable to assume the need will be.
Yes.
Charlie, I just want to make a few points here. I really want to certainly thank you and the committee for dispelling some of the fiction that the board and the committee did not listen to the community. I believe from the first time this recommendation was put out to this very night, as you recommend Scobie and Jarvis Lane area being moved, you have made, 12 moves now? 12. You have accepted 12 ideas from the community, and you've made 12 adjustments. I know when I first received this packet in my home, I opened it up, looked at it, closed it back up, put it back in the envelope, and knew it wasn't going to get my vote. And the reason it wasn't going to get my vote at that time is because of two things. First of all, I could not see past children being able to walk out their front door, see a school, but be bused in another direction. I couldn't get past that and couldn't vote for it because of it. And secondly, I have sat through the upstart of Walton Farm and also Bridle Path with very much of the public relations and sales pitch being the community school. We give them these cute little country day school names, we give them a sense of community, we make the buildings look different, we give them a personality, and then now we're going to move them again. So that whole concept of community on the first recommendation was also going down the tubes and wasn't worth the vote. But if the rest of the board is so inclined, which I am tonight, to accept the Scobie-Jarvis recommendation, I would feel most comfortable in supporting this plan to be moved ahead. I appreciate, too, that the natural boundaries are important, but as I look at that Area 10 at the Temenson Creek, and that being the premise on which you had divided it off before, granted it's a natural boundary, but it's not the, as I joked with Mrs. Shields tonight, it isn't the Long Island Sound. It's a creek. And, you know, it wasn't good enough a natural boundary. And I'm glad that's being moved. It certainly restores my faith in this whole, the whole recommendation as it's laid out tonight. I also want to point out a little on the mushy side, along with Mr. Bowman, for every child that's being moved to another school, you have to remember that he or she is leaving a buddy behind. I had a tough time coming here tonight because one of my 4 sons is very angry at me because his best friend is moving. And I'm thinking, gee, he's getting to stay in his old school, but see, his old school is going to be different now. There's children that are going to move to a new experience, but the children left behind now have the new experience of making another new best friend. So, you know, we need to look at the kids moving and times it by 2 because all those kids have friends. So, thank you, committee, and Mrs. Shields' wonderful leadership as our colleague and board member on this committee.
Are there any other board? Yes.
Charles, I'd like to thank the committee for their work and for listening to the community and revising and again revising. I think it showed your ability to listen, and I'm glad you had the opportunity to do that and did it. And I want to commend the committee for arranging for the growth. And, you know, living in Montgomery Township, I know what we face, and I think they did a nice job arranging for that where it's needed. If we can digress for a minute, many years ago, I had the chance to serve on a committee like this, and It was back when we were opening Nash School, and I came home from work one night, and my wife said to me, they want you to go to Montgomery School tomorrow to the gym, something about moving lines. And I went to Montgomery School thinking we were going to move the lines on the basketball court. Never in my life have I been so wrong. I appreciate all the work you did. Thank you. And Charlie, also, I will support that Gwinnett Shire staying in the Gwinnett Square School District, the Area 10.
Well, from what I hear from the board, it sounds like that you like the committee's recommendation with the exception that you would like to see Scobie and Jarvis included in Gwinnett Square. And Breeze. Oh my gosh, yes. And Breezewood. Are there any other comments from the board at this time? Okay. I would like to move, and we have public comment on this particular subject.
My name is John McCartney.
John, could you get closer to the mic, please?
My name is John. Ooh, that's a little too loud. My name is John McCartney. I live in Section 25 on Bradford Lane. Apparently, we have approximately, we're grouped in with both 24 and 25, 133 students, and our breakdown is approximately 56.
Correct.
And my thought in this is number one, when a couple of years ago, when Gwinnett Square was built, we were told when the first initial map came out that we were going to go to Gwinnett Square. Public meetings were held. We got kicked out. We stay in Gwynnor. And Gwynnor is a wonderful school, no problem at all, and we enjoy it. My daughter enjoys it. She does extremely well. Now, on the original boundary that you made, we were going to Gwinnett Square again. And daughter got all excited. She's going back to see her friends that had been transferred 2 years ago from Gwynnor over to Gwinnett Square. So now we're all very happy. A couple of weeks later, we come to find a new map comes out, and now again, we're the horse that gets kicked around. We get moved out of the Gwinnett Square again, and now we're going into Englewood, which I understand is not a bad school or any problem like that. It's just the fact that we are very community, do a lot of things within our community and our township in Upper Gwinnett. And we would like to continue to stay in the Upper Gwinnett Township. And it seems to me that most of the people going to Gwinnett Square are in Upper Gwinnett. And it seems that you have made all sorts of gyrations to make everybody in Gwinnett Square area or Upper Gwinnett area happy, except for us little guys down in 25 that just keep getting kicked around. Section 13 has, I believe, 83 or 74 people, if I'm not mistaken. There in Telmenson Township, Englewood is in Telmenson Township. You're now adding Scobie and Jarvis and Breezewood, but you're not. You're adding people to Gwinnett Square, but you're not subtracting any. And you must leave some room for growth in there. So take 13 out, put it where it should be, put it where it was originally planned to go into Englewood, and it just seems like a much better plan to me. That's pretty much all I have. It just seems to me that everything's, you have gone and taken strides to take care of those people with homes above a couple $100,000. And us, we live in a couple $100,000, but most of ours are townhouses, maybe 100, 150. But it seems that they've addressed more of the what they seem to be upper crust people. And I'm sorry, it's not acceptable to me. Thank you.
My name is Tom Barrett. I live on Bryan Way in Upper Gwinnett Township. And up until a few days ago, I didn't realize it, but I'm a resident of District 25, and I have a sudden sense of community to become an active participant in District 25. The board has been very flexible, and it is a tough job. I've never done anything like this, but I can imagine that, like you say, you can't satisfy everybody. But we're just concerned that we're the last to be heard from. Last night I was at the education center, and I heard people come up from District 24, District 25, we're from 25, we're from 24. I don't hear a peep about it that tonight. I hear about 10 people over by Valley Forge Road. I didn't hear anything about them last night, so just kind of concerned that, we were happy before. Like John said, we were pleased. We too have been very happy at Gwynn Orange and done really well. But my daughter lost a lot of friends who went to this school here, where we now vote, and we just want to make sure that we get our due process in this process. A lot of arguments have been put forth tonight about why one group should be moved and one group should not be moved. For example, the example was brought up of the one district where the kids would have to cross the railroad tracks. Unless they're out at 2 o'clock in the morning, they ain't going to see a train on those tracks. But much more dangerous is the SEPTA tracks keep going up to Doylestown, and you've got kids crossing those tracks now. I'd cross those tracks blindfolded twice in the middle of the night, as opposed to going across Valley Forge Road, which is where the kids from District 13 have to go. Now, that's just an interesting point, but it just sort of makes a point there. Ms. Mengel talked about community, and community is largely based on location, and in geography we talk about adjacency. If you look at the map, with the exception of the 2 districts out in Hatfield that are not inhabited yet or very lightly inhabited, 24 and 25 are the only districts that are not adjacent to the sector that their school is located in. In other words, we have to climb over 10 and 11 to get to our school and go over a township boundary. And now we're climbing over kids who are staying in their school. You also, when you talk about, not moving twice, not moving once, I don't think anybody in 25 has moved yet, but the kids in 24 have been moved. And I think there's a difference between moving back to the school you came from versus moving yet again to some third school. And I think, the Nash kids are going back. There's no real way to make everybody happy. I just wanted to make our arguments heard. And I'm just a little concerned that, all the people who spoke last night, somehow about 25 and 25, we didn't hear anybody say anything about it. We're last. In fact, if you listen to the way that Mr. Keffer went around the arguments, he started in Montgomery, went around to Hatfield, came around to Tolmenson, and then at the end he mentioned 24 and 25 before quickly pointing out that he was going to keep these other folks at the schools. I don't see why we have to, hurry about this. This could be delayed. If we put this off a year, it might impact later. But you're going to have some other kids out of the school and into middle school. We keep talking about this Pennsylvania Economic League study. That's getting pretty old. I mean, was that written in the 80s during the boom? I have neighbors who are moving. They're moving out of the area. And so there is growth, but there is time. And I'd like to thank everybody for this forum. I'm originally from a real big city, and you would never hear of anything like this happening in a district of 3 million students, so I'm just happy to have this opportunity. Thanks.
My name is Rhonda Fleming. I live at 1145 Jarvis Lane. The remaining part of sections 10 that we've been talking about tonight, or that you've been talking about tonight, I'm just here to thank the committee for all of their hard work. It's been, I know, a hard task, and I know they feel like everyone is against them. But we're not. We're just all concerned parents, and I do want to thank you for listening to us and listening to all the community. I'd also like to thank the board members who have considered us tonight, because we are small in number, and we do, when the second map came out, we did feel isolated. We were being taken away from our township and from the surrounding community neighbors that we have been going to school with for the past 8 years in my situation. I just want to thank you for considering us. Thank you.
My name is Jan Fisher. I'm a task force member, and I'm from number 27. You may never ask me to be on a task force again. As a spokeswoman for the task force for several weeks, I feel compelled to speak at this time. The majority of our task force members did not recommend this Scobie-Jarvis move. All the presidents of home and school on our task force agreed that it was unfair to single out one small group of people to cut a special groove in the map. We treated number 10 as a whole entity. We are sympathetic, we still are sympathetic to 12 and 11. I would like this assembly to know that as representatives of our home and schools, we support all of the people who didn't shout loud enough to be heard. What kind of a message does this give to all the future settlements that have to be made in this district as we face the changes ahead?
Good evening. My name is Kirk Horstman from 714 Pineview Lane. That's in Upper Gwynedd. I've attended 2 of these meetings so far. My children go to North Wales School. I noticed North Wales School was conspicuously absent from tonight's conversation, as it was from previous conversations. I think it's pretty much because the boundary is status quo for North Wales, and that's okay, because I'm not here really to contest the boundary. But what I am concerned about is I think the school is borderline overcrowded. And I know the board's been doing their best to keep ahead of growth here in our district, and that's been quite a challenge. Last June, when you were considering the high schools and so forth, it was one of my opinions that if we went with a smaller high school, that would create pressure on the lower schools, because obviously the net result of that whole thing was that we ended up with possibly fewer classrooms than we might have otherwise had. So there's got to be some trickle down there that puts pressure back to the elementary schools. And now that I see this utilization chart, my fears seem to be somewhat founded. In particular, I'm just going to talk about North Wales School. The chart that we have shows that some of the classrooms are going to be at their upper limit of attendance. There's no music room. There seems to be little contingency for growth at that particular school. And I have the feeling that in some ways this could create stress, not just on the students, but on the teachers and the administrators. I understand Mr. Keffer's point about how creative the teachers and the administrators can be sometimes, and how perhaps some of the art teachers and music teachers are flexible about teaching from carts and so forth. But I can't think that it's healthy for any amount of time for every nook and cranny of a school to be occupied and people having to shuffle in and out and so forth and accommodate this type of crowding. So overall, I'm just going to conclude by saying that as best as I can decipher, North Wales is at its limit. It's not acceptable to me that we're not going to have a music room, for example. I think we need a couple more classrooms there, and I'd like to know just how long does it take to think through a modular classroom and so forth, if you need one, and get it into place. Is it, after the damage has been done, or can you get one done on short notice?
Mr. Horstman, I defer to the question of how long it takes to modular Mr. Wood in a moment, but I want to point out something. The task force did look at a way to remedy the concern that you have, which I believe would be pretty much limited to grades 4, 5, and 6. I'd ask you to look at the distribution on that chart a little closely. Earlier in the presentation, I talked about the number of vacant seats in the rooms as laid out. And I think clearly that would show that we could accommodate 39 more kindergarten youngsters. That's unlikely to happen, but in fact there would be space for that many. In the first grade, there would be space for 14, in the second, 21, in the third, 10. And then I think I understand your concerns, grades 4, 5, and 6. If we were to find an additional neighborhood, it would be unreal to believe that we would find a neighborhood that only contained 4th, 5th, and 6th graders so that we could reduce that. obviously, you understand, I'm sure,
Well,
that kids come across the board.
As I pointed out, I wasn't concerned about the boundary. I just want to know how there's going to be
No,
another
but I'm
classroom there.
concerned about the boundary because in order to alter the situation that you seem to be concerned about, which is a higher number of youngsters in grades 4, 5, and 6, we would have to find a neighborhood to reduce that. That's not
How about
possible.
just build me a modular classroom?
Well, let me move on a little bit. I indicated this is a planning document. There are a number of classes here where we may require a room or so that we don't have.
Right.
It may mean that if we came to the point where, example, in grade 6 and we got into the late spring or the summer and that 56 turns out to be 57, I doubt that I could persuade this board to add a modular because there are going to be one section of 28 and another of 29. I don't think that would make educational sense, frankly, and I don't think it makes dollar sense either.
Well, I'm here to say I'm willing to pay the taxes.
Okay.
I always would be. Coincidentally, I happen to be on that bubble because I just happen to have identical twins in grade 4. So they've been riding that little wave through North Wales School, and they'll be riding it for the next 3 years, or for the remaining 3 years. So I would like the board to be aware that there are these little tight spots, and we need to do something about them. I've got another child getting ready to go through North Wales in a few years, and I wouldn't want her to be in the same situation.
Mr. Horstman, I can tell you that, as Mr. Keffer said earlier this evening, when we have come to the board with a legitimate need to add modulars, the board has supported that. It wouldn't be for 1 or 2 students, but if it occurred that we really needed modulars there, we know from an architectural point of view that we could put 2 to 4 modular classrooms there. It would be a question of waiting to see what the enrollment's going to do, the number of youngsters, and as Mr. Keffer said, have a better handle on that as we move through the school year.
Good. Well, thank you for considering that point then.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Schouts. I'm in section 27. I don't think we've heard anybody here tonight on that. I'm at 902 Buckboard Way. My neighbors and I are here tonight to make one last appeal that involves both section 27 in the way which decisions will be made in our district's future. We realize that maintaining the integrity of our neighborhoods is missing as a defined objective in the redistricting proposal. We have been told that our 20-plus children are a small piece of a puzzle, and we realize this also. However, we ask that Section 27 be moved to Walton Farm. Even with our 20-plus children, Walton Farm will not be filled near to capacity. We ask this not because it's a new school and not to avoid Inglewood. In fact, Inglewood would be preferable if the remainder of our neighborhood were near there. The task force considered and acted upon other unusual situations. Ours is unusual too. Our children are now faced with having to end their social contact with their friends. Section 27 was in Walton Farm in the previous proposal. In the current proposal, a line was drawn down a residential street, which was carved out at the last minute. We've had only one night to speak out to defend our right to stay. Our district sections are in a similar dilemma. Revisions were made following the meetings on October 26th and 28th. To our knowledge, no revisions were made following last night's meeting. We plead to the board for fairness and consideration. Please do not allow decisions to be finalized on the basis of who throws the longest and hardest tantrum. Doing so would set a poor precedent and send a most unfortunate message to the community. There are many changes to come in our district. Please seek out fairness and justice as a basis for solving differences. Thank you very much.
My name is Janet Vitus, and I'm at 1068 Snyder Road, which is Section 12. Actually, it's the corner of Kindle and Snyder. For the last 2 years, this being the third, the boundary has been Snyder Road. Section 12 is surrounded by roads, and for the last two, this being the third year, we have been bused with 2/3 of Section 13. I'm asking you, the school board, to consider Section 12 staying at Gwinnett Square. For the last week, there has been 21 to 22 kids on the bus. Then they go over to Section 13 to pick up the remaining kids. Out of that 21 to 22, 4 are fifth graders. 3 of the 4 do not have any younger siblings, 1 does. So I think that has to be a consideration about these fifth graders being moved a second time for 1 more year and also going then to a junior high. Again, Section 12 is surrounded by streets, and for the last 3 years, they've had to make friends out of Section 13 or surrounding areas that go into Gwinnett Square. And when you're talking neighborhood, that is our neighborhood. It is not, that's where all of our kids play with, their friends are. And I think, that has to be a consideration. If you're going to start considering creeks and railroads, then use the high school as a boundary. Section 12, there is no room for expansion. Even though it looks big on the map, most of the ground is North Penn High School and the bus garage. So there's no room for developmental growth in that area. If you want to use creeks and railroads as boundaries, then I suggest using North Penn High School as a cutoff, meaning the neighborhood at Kindle and Amber Lane remain at Gwinnett Square, which is only 7 children. And I don't think 7 children will hurt the numbers either way. Thank you. I also want to commend Jan on her comment. I think, it's good for us to know that the task force has worked very hard at this and that they still feel that some changes either can be made or certain changes should not be made. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gretchen Herney, 329 Evergreen Drive, North Wales. We don't even rate a number. Mr. Horstman already talked about what he considers and what I very much consider to be overcrowding in the upper 3 levels. My daughter is in 4th grade, and I volunteer over at North Wales Elementary once a week, so I am rather familiar with the classrooms walking by, and I consider the conditions to be rather crowded. You are trying to make decisions on 3 factors: demographics, physical space, and budget limitations. That's why we're here. It's been inferred that parents are not seeing the needs for fiscal responsibility when we address the same issues. The board says they've got to be fiscally responsible. Well, I've got some questions pertaining to that. How many of you in this room are aware of the unique situation at North Wales Elementary? We have 2 libraries in the building. One of them is for the students' use, the school students. The other library is for the benefit of the North Wales residents. Can you tell me how many square feet does this municipal library occupy?
I can't off the top of my head tell you that. I mean, that's available and I can share it with you more.
Well, I'm guessing. I mean, would it be enough square footage for 2 classrooms? Would it be enough square footage for 3 classrooms?
Enough square footage for 1 classroom, I can tell you that.
At least 1. If you walk in there, I think you could get more than 1, but at least 1. I would love it if somebody up on the board would say, golly gee, why don't we move 22 kids out of this school and move it over to that school, and we have to worry about having classes so small that we're worried about 20 and 21 students in them. Or if we do that, are we going to end up having maybe 30 children and have to have an aide? I don't want the children to have an aide. But then you turn around and you look at North Wales School, and it's perfectly okay, to be overcrowded, and then if we need to have an aide, we get one. Well, you look at grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6. Right now at grade 4, 25 children. You can get maybe 7 more. At grade 5, we've got 27 to 28 children. You have room for 1 more child, and grade 6, you have room for 0 more children. We go over to Culp. They've had modulars added, and they have a 6th grade proposal of 19 to 20 children in the classroom. That's not equal. So if we go back to the square footage that this municipal library is occupying, and the possibility that it could be 1 or 2 classrooms, I'd like to know why you're scrambling all these children throughout the district to justify your charts on the space issue. If you worry about adding modulars and you're talking about $55,000 or $70,000 cost for a modular, how can you possibly justify subsidizing any enterprise from which most of your taxpayers derive no benefit? The only people that can use the North Wales Municipal Library free are the residents of North Wales. Nobody else in this school district can walk in there, if they're not a resident of North Wales, and borrow a book for free. Yet the school district thinks it's perfectly okay to lease this, and they lease it for a fee, ladies and gentlemen, of $1 a year. Now, please think about what you're doing. Think about what you're doing to the children in this particular school, as well as moving the children in all the other schools, and start being fiscally responsible with the space you already have. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Davis, I believe that concludes the task force presentation. Oh.
Hi, my name's Connie Spire. I live at 228 Stephen Road, live in Upper Gwynedd. My children go to North Wales. I am also concerned about North Wales, the space there. As was mentioned before, we have very tight quarters in the 5th and 6th grade, with 2 more children for another class from 5th grade, 1 more child needing another class from 6th grade. And I think I also need to point out that we are one of the schools that house the special ed children, and the 13 special ed children that we have at North Wales are not included in these figures. And if they were included, I believe we would already be over the 28 number now. Something else we need to be careful about in looking at this space utilization chart is the number that we have put down for our kindergarten class. I understand why this number was used. It has been fairly accurate in the past predictions to base the incoming kindergarten on the current kindergarten numbers. However, if you will notice, it is a very low number, it's 61 students. And if you compare this year's kindergarten class of 61 with last year's kindergarten class, there's 18 children difference, which we're talking 1 classroom size difference. I think that is substantial. I realize that even if this does happen, we will have enough space to house those kindergarten children. However, the year after that, there will be a problem. And I think we do need to consider this. I know we're not considered a high-growth area, but there is great potential for turnover, and I think we have to recognize that fact also. And as Mr. Kever stated at one of the previous meetings, that the initial proposal showed 2 vacant classrooms in the district, and he said from past history, he was sure that those classrooms would be filled. And I feel that does really go across the board, that we are going to be having more children in the fall than now. We just can't predict which classes they're going to be in. Okay. Now, in the guidelines, it is stated that in grades 4th, 5th, and 6th, which has already been mentioned several times tonight, that we're not exceeding 28 students, and if that happens, we are going to add another classroom. And I know it's already been stated before that North Wales does not have another class to give up. They have an art room, you will see. But as I already stated, it looks like we're going to be in need of 2 classrooms where we only have 1 classroom to give up. Okay? All right, I understand that we have to give up some of the quality of our education by going without art and music rooms and using art and music on a cart. And I realize that those programs are good programs. I'm not dismissing that fact. But really, especially art, it is not the same. It is a lower quality. I mean, just for instance, a kiln cannot be put on a cart, and none of the projects that you would use with the kiln can be used with our children on the cart. But I do understand that when we are looking at the alternative of building another school, that yes, we have to be ready to give up some of the quality of our education in order to save a great deal of money. But I am concerned that I feel we have to draw the line on how much quality we're willing to sacrifice before we say enough is enough. And I think we as a community need to figure out where that point is and act responsibly when we reach that point. Okay? I think we need to explore what Mrs. Herney said about the North Wales Library issue, since this is space in our current building, and since modulars are really expensive, and I can understand for the few years here that maybe you're thinking that would be an extravagance, but we are talking about space that we already have. We are talking about 2 libraries in 1 building, and I just think that we really do need to look into that. I realize it is a sensitive issue with the borough. I have been a paying member of that free library for about 7 years, and I've utilized it a good bit with my children, and so I recognize the value also, but I do think we just need to look at everything. So I am appealing to the board to consider more space at North Wales. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Georgia Fano. I'm also a member of the Committee on the Realignment, and I'd like to say that we all worked very hard and long on trying to reach decisions for this. And the one issue that most of us did not agree with was the Scobie-Jarvis area. I think that it was a little premature of everyone to sit up here tonight and make a decision on their part. I'm not saying I'm for or against Jarvis or Scobie going or staying, but for you to sit here tonight and make a decision after we've worked since September to try to decide, it just seemed a little premature for me, since area 12, 24, and 25 had the same concerns as Scobie and Jarvis. And I think that that should be something that should be thought about just a little bit, besides just coming out tonight and saying, let's change them around. We did work a long time on this. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, George. What I tried to explain, and as I said when I brought it to the board, was that this was a troublesome area. And when I said it, I did not have it come as a board recommendation. It seemed that that was the board, excuse me, a task force recommendation. That was the exception, and that's why we are discussing it. Okay. Yes.
My name is Debbie Francis, and I live at 13 State Street, and I'm in Section 24. And I would ask that you reconsider possibly trying to do something with these children in 24, and 25 is not to break up the neighborhood of Upper Gwinnett and keep them at Gwinnett Square. I know that the numbers are tight, and I don't know what you could possibly do, but being last night at the meeting, and most of the people speaking at last night's meeting spoke of, the children in sections 24 and 25. And again, I have to ask that after that meeting and hearing all the concerns from everybody in the additional changes brought forth last night, that again, this change in Section 10 was made. And I have to be honest with you, I really can't recall anybody speaking out on that change as of last night.
I have to address that, just one thing. I asked them to do that because it was, let's say it was your day in court. We had made some changes from the preliminary, and the people from area 24, 25, and 27 had not had a chance to really address their concerns. So it was out of respect for you people that they did not bring it up. They had 2 other opportunities to do it. That's why you didn't hear last night. Okay?
My only concern then is that after last night's meeting, I'd have to say that nothing was done to try to, make really any changes for the children last night. And I'm concerned that, I guess I'm one of the parents that feels like we came out last night and, we tried to, work real hard to get our children
I can
to
understand
stay
that,
with their
but let
community.
me assure you that immediately after that meeting was concluded and the public left, this committee did stay and work until after 11 o'clock.
There was absolutely not one issue addressed.
Well, let me suggest to you
Sir,
that
excuse me, you're out of order.
you
You're not going to have a
can-
debate here.
the committee did discuss all of the concerns that were presented. I don't think that you should conclude that because the committee did not change its course, that the issues were not addressed. They were addressed, they were considered thoroughly, and it was the sense of the committee that it wished to stay with the proposal it had made earlier in the evening.
I can certainly appreciate that this certainly wasn't easy for anybody, and I don't, would not want to be in their position. But I think, having one night just to go over the recommendations last night, it's very harsh for them to have to make a recommendation immediately following to the board this evening. And I think it needs to be taken more time to look at additional solutions. Thank you.
Mrs. Davis, I think.
Okay, we need to kick it back then, I guess, to the board to see if there's any further discussion or comments. And yes, Terry?
I have a question on sections 13, 24, and 25, the number of students involved. Because that, to me, tonight, that was logic that made sense.
Terry, in Area 13, there are 74 youngsters involved. That number would be expanded somewhat with the addition of kindergarten. But if we're talking about the youngsters moved, those are the ones that are there now in school. Of that 74 in Area 13, 26 of those were moved in 1991. You asked about Area 24. There are 61. Of that 61, 21 of those were moved in 1991. And in Area 25, there are 56. And this represents a first move for them.
When you're moving, I guess the section 13 going straight over to Inglewood and staying in Tolmenson, and 24 and 25 look like right now that they have to go, past York Avenue to get to Inglewood, and Gwynedd Square seems closer, and within their, township.
I think if you were to take a pencil or a pen and place it down the map and have one end at Inglewood, and you did that with Area 13, the far reaches of 13 would be approximately the same as the far reaches of 25.
I should point out, Terry, just to clarify, because I know you missed Charlie's presentation in the beginning, Area 11 is going to Inglewood, and Area 10, if the Scobie-Jarvis area remains at Gwynedd Square rather than getting moved a second time, the triangle where you see the 10 would also be part of the Inglewood attendance area. So it's not like 24 and 25 would be traveling through a Gwynedd Square attendance area to get to Inglewood. Right. It's a little confusing because everything's shaded gray. But
And they can't go to York Avenue.
I didn't trust it.
They used to be there, but we don't have any room.
There's no room in the end.
Any other board
questions?
Okay, then the boundary plan will be on the agenda next Thursday for the board, and I would say, Pat and Charlie, if the committee has any other fine-tuning to do. I don't feel that this is cast in stone and you can't make any adjustments if you see something that makes a lot of sense. And we're going to take a 5-minute break now before we move on with our agenda. Okay, we'll move to the next items on our agenda, which are under curriculum. And Pat, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. All right, our first item on the curriculum agenda is the science update, and I will turn it over to Dr. Venema.
Thank you, Pat. At this time, I'd like to introduce to the community our new science supervisor, Mrs. Donna Brown, who has been with us since this past August and has been heavily involved with the Science Curriculum Review Committee, a committee of staff and community members that is examining our K-12 science curriculum. Mrs. Brown is here tonight to give you an update on the status of that review process.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this chance to address you on some of the very positive changes that we're trying to bring about here at North Penn in science education. It's a very exciting time to be in science education. There are so many changes at the national level and the state level, and we're going to bring those to bear right here. It's also a very exciting time for North Penn for our chance to be involved with the Merck Science Institute. And we have the chance to participate in a partnership with Merck. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as part of this process tonight and bring you this update. The Merck Science Institute was founded in 1992. Its focus is to improve science education, particularly at the K-8 levels. A long, long time ago, when I was still in high school, one of the great events that I think propelled science education into the future was the Sputnik event. And there were some great changes in science education at that point. They were mainly focused, however, on the secondary level. And I think we kind of missed the boat with a lot of our youngsters that we really need to bring forward into science education. The great thrust now is to reach those children. It's going to make an enormous impact. And I think you will see some of those changes. As part of the Merck program, in focusing on K-8 education, they will want to transform science teaching. That's one of the things that we have to do. We have to bring more people up to date on the newest techniques and strategies in science teaching. They will also be reforming some of the education of teachers, our pre-service teachers going into elementary teaching. They will also be creating a consensus on the importance of science education at the elementary level. It's at a very critical point and a very exciting point. And there will be 4 areas that the Merck Institute will focus on in doing that. One is the professional development of teachers and mentoring of teachers. A second is the reform of teacher education. A third is the Merck Resource Center, where there will be materials available for teachers and districts to borrow to help improve science education in their own districts. And finally, policy support for systemic change in science education. That's a pretty major commitment, and it's exciting to be able to work through that. Our work focuses on our Science Review Committee. Our science curriculum is in its review cycle. We are spending the greater part of this year in doing that. And let me tell you a little bit about the Science Review Committee. The committee's work began before I arrived. I wish that I could have been here earlier. It's exciting to be here, and it's exciting to build upon the work that they have already done. They are composed of a cross-section of people in our district, including teachers, district administrators, principals, community members, people who represent industry, parents. It's a true representation of good people who are interested in science education and its improvement. We are now involved in both studying the curriculum and looking at possible changes and looking at changes in support materials that would be provided so that we can give our children here the very best of science education. One of our first tasks, since I've been here, this is week 13, is to provide our district with a philosophy or statement of philosophy about science education that would really guide us in making some of the changes and decisions that we will do this year. I won't read you the entire statement. It is one page, but I won't read you that. I will just focus on some of the high points of that and end with the final sentence, which I think is very important in getting you to understand what our philosophy is. First and foremost, in line with all the national norms, we feel that science education is for all children, every child. We feel that it will encompass a core of concepts in line with the district's vision and goals, and we feel that it will definitely be hands-on and experiential, very active for children. We think that children will have and should have access to the equipment and tools of scientific investigation, updated materials, and safe and secure surroundings in which to work. What do we want kids to do? What do we want them to be able to know? Well, we want them to be able to have process skills in science. Listen to what some of these are, and I think you might be surprised. Things like observing, collecting, and recording data, problem solving, predicting, analyzing, and interpreting results, practicing logical reasoning skills, communicating findings through speaking and writing, developing and refining higher order thinking skills. Are those just science skills? No, they're not. Those are life skills. That's what's so important about the core of science today. It's not just a microscope, it's not just a test tube, it's not just mixing chemicals. It's skills for life. We want children, our children, to be able to solve problems. And we as adults hope that we can solve a few. And we've certainly seen a few tonight that we all as adults have to address. We also want children to be able to work cooperatively, to explore independently, to be true caretakers of the earth, to be aware of that. We want our classroom teachers to support a variety of learning styles. We want our children to learn through a variety of experiences. And we want to be able to give our children a variety of means to assess how they're learning. Not every child learns the same way. We know that. And we expect to be able to address some of those issues. And finally, if I would just summarize the overall goal in this philosophical statement, the overall goal of science education at North Penn is to provide students with many opportunities to grow in their understanding of both science content and the application of science process skills in order that they might make informed personal, civic, and political decisions as citizens. That's really the core of where we're going. Now, very specifically where we're going in terms of program, some of the changes that you will see this year are on the reverse side of the sheet, the green sheet for the board. What we're looking at is to pilot test some of these hands-on units in science at each elementary school and middle school. We would look at having 4 schools test 1 unit in kindergarten, 2 units in grades 1 through 5. 7 elementary schools, the rest of them, would each pilot a single unit at a single grade level. At Pembroke and Penfield, we would like to try 1 unit in grade 6. This will build upon that transition for the return of grade 6 to the elementary. The result of this program this year would be that every elementary school and middle school will be involved in the pilot test of some new materials. And I think that's a pretty major contribution to the education of our children. That's only a part of what Merck has asked us to do. National science organizations have come up with many reasons and many ways to have an effective elementary program. Principally, there are 5. One of those is the testing or the development of or the implementation of hands-on units. That's the first step you see. The second is professional development of teachers to prepare and support them as they teach these hands-on units. That's the second part of the program that we want to start this year. Teachers will be trained in hands-on units, and classroom management strategies is applied to science classes. Science classroom management strategies are just a little bit different from ordinary classroom procedures. And we will also see that they're offered other in-service courses as those become available. The third part of what we need to do to make an effective elementary science program is to have some sort of support system to supply materials and equipment to teachers. This is often very difficult to do logistically, and we will have a subcommittee of our Science Review Committee research that. They will be researching best practices because there are many districts across the country that have already done this, and we might as well learn from them so that we don't reinvent the wheel and that we can come up to speed as quickly as possible. A fourth aspect is to have assessment methods for evaluating student performance. We are cooperating with the Merck Institute, which has employed Eagleton Institute out of Rutgers in New Jersey to evaluate the impact of the Merck Institute on our district, as well as the 3 New Jersey districts which are participating. We are also looking to develop a district assessment tool which will still incorporate our Goal 1 philosophy and allow us to measure how our students are improving in their science education. We will also use varied assessment strategies within the units that we teach, again, to accommodate varied learning styles. And finally, the last aspect of a good elementary science program is administrative and community support. We already have community involvement on our Science Curriculum Review Committee. We have an enormous amount of community involvement in the science nights and things that we plan throughout the year. There will be periodic updates, as I am doing tonight, on the science program as we progress through the year. And we are looking to other outreach type of programs. We say, for example, science nights, but there's nothing to say that that couldn't be something like a science on Saturday. There could be all kinds of varied strategies that we could use. We are also looking at parent training awareness programs because there's a lot that parents can do at home to support the learning that we will be implementing in the schools, and we want to keep parents informed. We also have science by mail again this year, also supported by the Merck Institute. And I think a very important aspect that the committee would like to explore in greater detail is the possibility for students to become aware of science careers at a much earlier age. I think very often we all wait too long, and we need to be able to at least set those kinds of things on the table for children to explore. Those are some of the things that we plan in elementary science. At the secondary level, we're also working. We are working to review all the courses that we teach, the curriculum that we teach, and plan for new courses if needed. And we are researching that, again, based on best practices in education and what best fits the needs here at North Penn. We will soon be looking at textbooks and support material to update our program and to improve our program. We are also very involved with the support and development of the Tech Prep program at the secondary level. In terms of the 789 reorganization, this will require a great deal of our time in terms of simply the reorganization and inventory of materials, distributing those materials over 3 schools. We have already begun that planning. Committee members will be involved. Teacher input will be involved. We are revisiting the concept of science fair. I often think it needs a better term. I like to think of a science fair as a celebration of learning, and it's an honor for students who participate. And we are revisiting that as a committee and finding out what will suit our purposes here in terms of education and what will best serve students. So it's going to be a very busy year. It has been already. It certainly is a challenge to address science education, not only here at North Penn, but really in any district in the country. I'm very proud to be working with this very talented committee in making some of these changes come about. And I welcome the opportunity to be here and to continue with that process throughout this year. Are there some questions from the board?
Yes, Donna, can you tell me a little bit about the Eagleton Institute? That's the first I've heard of them, and it's being linked up with Merck. Is that a subsidiary of Merck?
No, it is not. It is a division of what is called a Consortium for Policy Research in Education, and they are based at Rutgers. They have been employed by Merck to assess how the Merck Institute program is working here and also in the New Jersey districts. They are an assessment institute.
Mrs. Mengel, one of the things that we talked about when we introduced the Merck Institute is, you recall Dr. Vagelos, the CEO of Merck, indicated that if Merck was going to make a multi-year commitment to science education, they wanted to find ways to measure whether youngsters progressed in science education. So Merck contracted with Rutgers University, the Eagleton Institute, to devise some way to begin to evaluate that. Not necessarily completely in the traditional sense that you would give a science test to every youngster, but interviewing teachers, interviewing parents about their perceptions of how science education is changing to try to gather information about the science program as we go along.
Okay, would our students be taking tests for that assessment tool for their purpose?
Any tests that we would be using through the Merck Science Institute would have the same safeguards and requirements of any other testing in our school district. There would be, if a student's name were going to be placed on it, there would be written parent permission first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and those results, of course, are the ownership of the school districts, the students. Who owns the results of the test?
Well, we would certainly have the results of the tests, and so would the Merck Institute for Science Education have the results as well.
And the parents?
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Any further board questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, I'm excited that we're going forward on this. Obviously not as fast as I would like it to go, but a couple of items. Currently now at the high school level or the secondary level, textbooks are archaic. My daughter has one that could be an antique and, last forever. Are you addressing that issue currently to have some more support materials? It seems that the comments that we heard at Back to School Night was, talk to people, make sure you get some different textbooks, or the parents are having to supplement with a more upgraded textbook because the textbook is 20, 30 years old. I'm more concerned right now at that level that those science programs are still not getting any support material or not getting any look at doing some kind of hands-on in that sense.
The high school science program, first of all, has always been hands-on. That's always been very traditional with secondary high school courses. The other issue that you brought up is being addressed right now. Yes, I agree with you. The textbooks are very old. But the other aspect of that issue that's very immediate and something that we should all understand is that we have a very talented high school staff, and I have been meeting with them over the last couple of weeks in making sure that whatever material is presented to the students is updated. The teachers have done a tremendous amount of work in providing the kinds of hands-out and the kinds of materials that will assure that our students are being brought up to standard on all the materials that they need to be. It's hard working with an older textbook, but the reason that happened is it was caught in the cycle of review, and we're certainly addressing that issue right now. And we're making sure that students are not shortchanged in any part of their education.
A couple more issues. On the 7th, 8th, 9 reorganization inventory recommendation, it seems that you're kind of looking at the system and how it's going to be administered. Being that this is an ideal time to revamp that whole system, is there a more aggressive look at incorporating a lot more in the hands-on or the supplementary or the inclusion within Merck so that we're not saying that we're doing a pilot program, but actually really immersing the children in 7th, 8th, and 9th in a very aggressive program for our reorganization.
Yes, we're looking at that very seriously. We're looking at updates on technology and the merger of science and technology, particularly at the middle school level, which is very prominent in national education standards right now.
Carmen, one of the things that we were made aware of when we went to the Smithsonian this past summer for a week's worth of training was that most of the science education change in the way of hands-on science is being focused at the elementary level right now. There is some emerging middle school materials, but they are clearly behind the K through 6 efforts. When I spoke with Dr. Paravano from the Merck Institute, Merck is very interested in more hands-on activities for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and they're talking about funding some projects related to that to develop those kits. But the kits that are being that were begun last year in National Oak Park that are being expanded to some of our other schools are really exciting. And I would encourage, if Donna, if you could make a schedule available to the board, if they could find some time in the next several months to drop in and see some of the youngsters using those programs. The feedback that we've received from teachers and from parents has been wonderful. Kids are really excited about science because it's not an over-reliance on a textbook anymore. And when we heard about where some districts, and there aren't a great many around the country who have really moved into the hands-on science for a long period of time, but a few have done that. They're finding as many as 95% of their graduates have taken 4 years of high school science. They're finding that the young people are staying with science as opposed to viewing science at the high school level as a school district requirement. I'll get my requirement out of the way. I'll take my biology. I'll take my chemistry, and that's it. They're taking 4 years of science. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for us, but the middle school will not be neglected.
Well, you know, I agree with you that it should start at the elementary, but when we're talking about science careers, if we're making sure that at this point when we're redoing how 7th, 8th, and 9th are being taught because we're going to the 3 schools, certainly this is a perfect place to start fostering that science career. It's certainly a best place to start fostering our tech prep courses that we've been doing. And my last note on the science careers, I have a daughter who's very much into sciences, so, you know, it's a hot topic. One of the things that parents and I myself have had problems with is extracurricular activities in the sciences, summer schools, different programs, camps, things of that nature. I think it would be beneficial for all of us if that was also incorporated within the career science and things outside of school that could be encouraged in different areas, whether Merck provides them, the community colleges provides them, or we provide them ourselves. It certainly fosters that care for science and that interest for science beyond just the schoolwork.
Right, and I think that's going to be very important in raising that kind of awareness of the programs that are out there. And for children in science, there are many, many activities that are available for summer, after school, Saturdays, and I will do my best to make those aware, make those kinds of things available to the community.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Donna, thank you very much. We're glad to have you with us and very anxious for the program. The second thing on curriculum, Mrs. Davis, is the update on 6th grade transition, and I believe Mr. Keffer is going to address that.
I'd like to provide the board with a brief report on the grade 6 reorganization. And before I do that, I would just like to make the board aware of the members of that committee. It was a committee composed of teachers, administrators. Mrs. Shields represented the board, and there were also several parent members. The teachers were John Fisher, Gary Miller, and Chuck Slug from Pembroke. Tony Barbone, Liz Reichwein, Glenn Yetter from Penfield, Joanne Chiachetti, and Caroline Crew were representative of elementary teachers, because though the focus has been on grade 6, there will be some impact on teachers at all levels. Joanne is a teacher at North Wales. Caroline Crew is a kindergarten teacher here in this building. We had also Cindy Watson from the Inglewood School among that number. There were 3 of the elementary principals who served on that committee. Dr. Marianne Kemmer did a very fine job as the co-chairperson, along with John Fisher, who was and is a teacher at Pembroke. The other 2 principals who served on that committee were Meredith Roberts at Hatfield and Tom Sugar at North Wales. The other members of that committee were Sue Sinkinson, the staff developer, because we know that as we prepare to make that transition, staff development activities will be very definitely a part of that. I served on that committee, and we also had Judy Eisenhower, Michelle Kratz, and Debbie DeFelice as 3 parents. It was a very fine committee. I'd say that we had a good time doing the work, but we also worked very hard to try to sort through a variety of practices that are going on, not only in grade 6, but in current programs, kindergarten to grade 5. We did quite a bit of reading. We had some visitations to other school districts that have their 6th grades in elementary schools, and you may recall that we also did some work of an in-service nature and information nature to the committee with Mary Ann Driscoll. Dr. Driscoll is a well-known child psychologist who specializes in children who are moving from childhood into the adolescent period, and that's exactly where 6th graders are. Having done all that, the committee spent a considerable amount of time sorting out what it felt were the best practices and an attempt to create what would be an optimal environment for 6th graders when they find themselves in the elementary schools beginning in September. Actually, as we worked through that, the committee felt that much of what already existed in grade 6 was worthy of retention. The recommendations actually were rather limited in number and in scope, because we liked a great deal that we saw. And I think you could probably characterize these when I finish sharing them with you, is that very little is going to be actually new and different about grade 6. The most significant recommendation, I think, are the first 2. The first one was that the Goal 1 process and the Goal 1 curriculum works quite well in grade 6, and we should retain that, and we will, so that the curriculum for 6th graders is essentially next year going to be the same program that they are receiving at the present time. Secondly, team teaching has been an effective way to deliver instruction for children at that age, and it would be the intention of this committee to continue that process next year. Clearly, from the numbers of sections that you saw for 6th grade in each school on the attendance area chart, you can see that there will be a range in terms of the number of sections. At York Avenue, for example, there will be 2, but in other schools there might be 3 or 4. So the teams will look somewhat different, and the matter of who teaches what subjects will also be somewhat different because of the student populations and the number of staff members that we have. We know that the 6th grader is as Dr. Driscoll would put it, at the pinnacle of childhood. There is a strong need to be connected at that age, and we think that the team teaching situation enhances that. It is designed to be a transition from what our kindergarten through 5th graders experience in a self-contained classroom, where it's a limited number of youngsters who are pretty firmly bonded to one teacher for their school day. If we think about the high school and work down, it's clear that we departmentalize. Children have many choices in the high school, and therefore it's done through a departmental arrangement. The middle is where we're concerned about making a transition, and we think that the current teaming arrangement in grade 6 does that quite effectively, and we think that should be preserved so that children would not leave the elementary school, let's say, with a self-contained situation where they're responding to one teacher and then suddenly move into the secondary schools and the world has changed because all of a sudden they need to relate to a great many more teachers every day. Art, music, physical education would be taught to 6th graders in the same way that they are currently being taught to children in the elementary school. They will be given approximately the same time allocations. They will be taught once a week, and they will be taught by art, music, and physical education specialists. One change that will appear in the program next fall is the manner in which health is taught. We are making some revisions to the health program. We will, however, no longer have physical education teachers provide instruction for grade 6 children. The classroom teachers, 6th grade teachers, will do that, and that's consistent with the way it's done at other elementary grades. Home economics and technology education will no longer be a part of the program at grade 6, but in working along with the group that's currently exploring what to do with 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, those program offerings will simply be moved. They will be shifted from grade 6 into grade 7 and 8. So it's not a matter that the children won't have those experiences. It is the case that they will simply receive them later. A major reason for that is that we've talked a lot about space considerations tonight. Those two programs require specialized facilities. It's practical to offer them in grade 6 when we have grade 6 concentrated in 2 schools. It's obviously not practical, and it would be rather costly, to say the least, to try to replicate those facilities in 13 different locations. So I think that is a set of recommendations. I think you can see that what I said at the outset, that much has stayed the same. And I want to emphasize that the reason much is staying the same is because we think that what has been happening in our middle schools is generally very sound and deserves to be preserved. I certainly would, entertain any questions the board might have.
Charlie, what is technology education? What makes that up?
The older name used to be the shop experiences, Tom. I could have said shops, but I thought I'll use tech ed and somebody will ask.
I think one of the things that Mr. Bowman said earlier when we were talking about the attendance boundary changes is that the kids do better than the adults with the changes. And I think the 6th grade committee has found that a lot of their discussions have centered around the anxieties of 6th grade teachers who are wondering, what school am I going to be in? What team am I going to be on? What subjects am I going to teach? And that's been a process that's been a positive one. And just a week or so ago, I had an opportunity to meet personally with all of the Pembroke and Penfield 6th grade teachers. And I can tell you that the feelings now from our staff is that they've worked through any anxieties that they might have, and they're really very excited about the change and very supportive of it. And it's been a good process, and want to make the board aware of that.
That's a diplomatic way to say it.
I have a question, a comment. First of all, the comment, I recognize that this is a transition, but it's not like we're moving in on uncharted territories here. Terry and I have to laugh, I guess, because this is how it was in the 60s and 70s. So basically, you're returning back to what you knew all along.
And I guess you turned out okay.
Yeah, we think we're fine. But anyway, we think. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. It's everybody else that's nuts. Okay. But anyway, it's, you've been there before, and as I read this, I don't see really much different from the way it was there. I don't see a big change. The only change I do see is where my question generates, and that is phys ed and health being separated by I guess, two teachers, and I guess I always understood phys ed and health were generally a degreed area together, or hyper D, but when did that happen, and why do we do that?
Well, I go back on to the point that when sixth grade was in elementary schools, before we moved into the middle schools, they were taught. The phys ed came from the phys eders, and the health came from the classroom teacher. When we went into middle school arrangement, I think at that point we had the 2 periods in the day where the special areas went on a 6-day cycle that gives you 12 periods. Not only was health put into that configuration, but these youngsters need a great deal of physical activity. Recess was no longer a practical arrangement in a school of that size, so there was some additional phys ed. When these youngsters come back into elementary school, now recess is a very practical way to provide that movement, and we think that it's worth having that experience. We do not need the additional phys ed that they once had for a very different reason, and we think that we should keep the consistency that grade 6 teachers can handle that. They've handled it before, just as 5 do and 4 do.
Charlie, a couple of points on clarification. Currently in the 6th grade, the gifted children are in their own team. How will you handle that as far as, say, maybe at York Avenue, or where you only have 2 teams, or there may be a small amount of gifted children?
To begin with, the idea of putting gifted children on a team works when you have a larger population to draw upon, Carmen. As we disperse that population now from 2 centers to 13, obviously there are going to be fewer gifted children in every school. The proposal is that we will not put them necessarily on a team of their own, because in most schools there's going to be a team. So they will be interspersed with other youngsters, and they will be given the gifted program as a resource room operation in a fashion similar to what is done with children K to 5.
I guess my concern, and I guess you're addressing it, is equity among all the schools, so that one school will not have a gifted team and the other school would have it integrated.
No.
I mean, I think your idea of integrating it all.
I can assure you, Carmen, that won't happen, and I think the best example of that is if we simply take a look at what happens in every school now, kindergarten through 5. And I know that sometimes parents are concerned because when they look at staffing, this has come up in the attendance area discussion. There was some concern that in this building, for example, there is a teacher of the gifted full-time. At some of our other schools, those teachers are there, part of every week. And that's simply a reflection of the numbers of identified gifted students that you happen to have in a building. In this building, it happens to be 60 plus. It requires the services of that person to do it. In a building that has half that number, then obviously you wouldn't need as much time. So there will be equity in that sense.
Well, my concern is that if you're going to disperse the gifted in the different teams, then you do it through all the schools to make sure that it's dispersed through all the teams.
But keep in mind, as I said, at York Avenue, the team is 2 teachers and 50 kids, and in some place else it'll be 3 teachers and 75 and that
How
kind of
exactly are you going to handle?
I'm sorry?
How are you going to handle the teachers themselves? If you've got team working, you're going to have 2 teachers for the 6th grade instead of the 4 subjects?
Well, I indicated that the composition of the team will differ in terms of the number of teachers, and what they each teach will also have to be different. That is not really significantly different than what is happening at the moment. At Pembroke, there are 4 teacher teams, and it's math, science, social studies, and English. At Penfield, there are a variety of practices that are going on. There are some teams of 4, but there are also some teams of 3. So some of those people are already teaching more than one subject. That is worked out through discussion with the staff and the principals, and that's what we would plan to do here. So that probably means in a school with 2 teachers that those 2 teachers would probably be teaching more subject areas than they might in a team of 3 or 4. That has to be tailored to each situation. We have to work that out as we go.
Have you considered possibly sharing teachers, like a math teacher between 2 areas, 2 elementary schools?
No.
And therefore, you've got a team of 3 instead of
No,
a teacher
we
teaching 2
haven't.
subjects?
We haven't because what that would do would essentially spend some valuable staff time with teachers on the road. We think that we have handled these youngsters successfully. I can speak from my own experience when grade 6 was still in the elementary school and I was the principal in the Gwynn North School. We did some teaming at that time, and we found it worked quite well. It is a matter of the principal and the staff sitting down together and making decisions about how the schedule is going to be put together. But it will look different in different buildings because of the numbers.
Charlie, I have a couple questions. In a quick look at the space utilization, we have 39 classrooms of 6th grade.
Right.
I think we have it broken down. Now, obviously, there's more than 39 core teachers teaching core subjects in the 2 middle schools.
Well, interestingly enough, it's sheer accident that the number that we're looking at is 39, and the number of grade 6 teachers we actually have, the art, music, and phys editors aside, Dick, is 39.
And are all those qualified at the elementary and secondary?
Yes. They're all qualified to teach in the elementary school.
Oh, which is important.
Right.
In this case. So there's a logical one-for-one rollover.
Yes. However, part of our plan is, as Fred would tell you, every spring we give teachers an opportunity to express interest in a different assignment. I would expect that most 6th graders will say, I prefer to continue to do that. There may be some who might opt to teach at another level, and consequently there may be teachers in the current K-5 who might want to be 6th grade teachers. We have always been receptive to that, allowing staff to express their wishes. The decision is finally made, however, in terms first of what is in the best interest of the system overall. And since we are creating 2 new staffs, we need to consider the balance there. We're going to take some experienced teachers. We'll take some people that are beginners and put it together much as we did when we opened this building. So that there will be some shifting. And if you look at that chart again closely and you were to compare it with the chart that exists now, it's not only a matter that some 6th grade teachers will need a changed assignment, but that same thing can be true K-5 because we're dropping the number of sections.
And that generally happens every year.
Yes.
One more question in regard to, we talked about that the 6th graders would receive some mobility within the classroom or within the school so that they didn't have the same teacher for everything. And I know that becomes very difficult at, say, York Avenue, where there's only 2 classrooms of particular grades. Maybe you can enlighten myself and the rest of the board on how we go about. Does one teacher, for example, teach all of the social studies for all of the 6th grade, and then and while that's happening, the other teacher is teaching all of the, when they flip-flop
Well,
classes?
there are a variety of ways that it can be done. Certainly there might be time when the 2 teachers will decide to put the 50 kids together and do some experience at, and work it jointly. There might be more typically a time when, for example, one teacher may be teaching language arts, and maybe that's the language arts, and the social studies teacher will be working, the teacher may be working in those 2 areas. Another teacher may be working with science and math.
I understand.
And we plan to make flexible, because I need to also share with the board, sound learning theory indicates that the more you can relate the disciplines, the more you can show kids the relationship between something they learn in social studies and math the sounder that is. The more connections there are, the more children learn, and the longer they retain it. So over time, we will increasingly try to do that. Now that's not something that we're going to be able to do for September. That will emerge in the same way that has emerged in the K-5 classes over time. These people need to do some team building. They need to learn to work together. They need to determine whose strengths, where the strengths are, what we can capitalize on. And I think it's exciting because I think this is a wonderful opportunity to do some really fine things with instruction beyond where we are at this point. I think we have a strong base from which to come.
Thanks, Charlie. One more quick question. As I understand it, the time frame, and it would be very important that before the end of the year, all of the teachers that are going to move will know what their new assignments were, so that there can be some team building, understanding that
Yes.
the school year ends and they're not obligated to get together over the summer or anything.
Dick, you know that contractually we're obligated to make assignments by June 1. Fred's office works toward that every year. This is a year when we think we have particular needs. We need to do team building. We need staff development. We have teachers that are 84% of the teachers in grade 6 have taught in elementary school before, and they have taught all the subjects. So this is not going to be new to the vast majority of them, and they did that in this district. However, there are some teachers who have not taught a particular subject area for a number of years, and we will be providing some of those experiences. Donna, Carol, Dave Decker will do that, along with Susan and Rick.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Any other questions? All right, that concludes curriculum.
Thank you, Pat. We'll move to facilities, Rob.
Yes, in your packet, you have a timeline for construction of the new high school. Art, I think, would like to go over that with us.
One of the things that we considered in developing this timeline was the fact that we recognize that unlike an elementary building where you can occupy in September or late August for September opening, in a secondary building in a high school where we're going to be bringing many new items into the building as far as materials and supplies, setting up science areas, setting up an IMC, setting up technology labs, and similar facilities, and the fact that on or about August 15th, we need to have functioning locker rooms, we need to have band rooms that are ready to support a marching band and so forth. We considered the fact that we need to have substantial completion and acceptance of that building on or about May 1 of 1997. We then backed off of that schedule and moved back to a point where we were looking at about a 26-month time frame for construction. And then going beyond that, we needed to consider all the approvals that we have to face and the fact that Don and other administrators will want to begin the educational spec part of this building, which really involves quite a bit of work because of the departmentalized function in the building and because of other facilities that you have in a secondary building, and especially a high school, that you don't have in a middle school or an elementary building. So based upon that, we felt that it was very important for the board in the month of December to appoint an architect that will work cooperatively with the instructional staff to develop the ed spec, and will also begin working with our department as it relates to seeking land development approvals in Montgomery Township. We know that we're going to have some off-site work as it relates to the intersection of Keenest and Horsham and Keenest and County Line. We know that we're going to be facing some wetland studies on the property. We're going to be doing a stream crossing, which is something we've never done before. So there are many things that will require good pre-planning and adequate time to bring us to the point that we can occupy on May 1, 1997. So we would recommend
the proposed time frame that you have in front of you for the construction of a new high school?
Thank you, Art. I'd like to point out that Bill Haberstadt, Terry Perkowski, and myself will be taking the first step on that schedule. We're going to be going out next week on a whirlwind tour, I think, Art, an all-day whirlwind tour, and seeing a number of facilities to view the work of various architects. And we do anticipate being able to come to the board in December after the new board is sat to interview architects to pick one.
Ralph, is part of that interviewing process going to be getting an understanding then and there about the assumed percentage of fee? Will you get that information then?
Yes.
Okay. Some of them just come with a standard fee, and I just
No,
want to know that
we
up
will
front.
encourage the finalists that they need to come forth. That fee will be a very important part of their presentation.
Of the interview process. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will happen in the interview process, and we will also spell out the other consultants we will be using as it relates to off-site work, on-site work, site work in general,
Right.
and what we will provide as it relates to survey documents and archaeological digs and all the things that we will provide the architects so that they clearly understand
Right.
that their percentage or their fee percentage of the total construction cost, what it will include.
Okay. A few more questions here. I see that you're starting in January '94 to seek approvals, plans, and just the communication necessary with Montgomery Township, and yet you want that completed by September of '94. And even though it's, 6 to 8 months there, gosh, I think it may require even more time than that.
It typically does, and what we're looking for there, we did this building, for an example, in 9 months, from the time we met informally
Right.
with the township until we got final approval.
Right.
What we're looking for here is we can still go out with bid documents and have some undone business as it relates to off-site improvements. Because typically we will bid those separate, as we are doing at Walton Farm, for an example. The roadway reprofiling and the things that we're doing off-site will be a separate document, and as a result, we got our approval, if you recall, well after awarding the bid for the township, or, for Walton Farm construction. So that date is, when I say bring closure, we want to be close to knowing what we need to do as it relates to the actual site.
Okay. Last question. Maybe it's just a matter of misunderstanding here, but your last statement here, substantial completion, building turned over to owner. I would think that even now we're more than owner in equity. What do you mean it gets turned over to the owner?
What happens, substantial completion means that we can enter the building, we will have an occupancy permit,
Okay.
but there are still things as it relates to a punch list.
Right.
And it needs to be punched out in the month of June, July, and August prior to bringing youngsters into it.
That's it?
Okay, any other board?
Are there any other board questions? Are there any questions of the audience?
Okay, if not, we thank you for coming this evening. There is an executive session of the board, folks, on personnel. Just going in the back room back there.